Hi, this is Landon Bryce from Thoughtcast.com, and I've got a question for you. Am I an autistic Ellen Jamesian? Are you? If you don't know what an Ellen Jamesian is, then you're not familiar with one of my favorite novels, The World According to Garp by John Irving. Irving is probably my favorite contemporary novelist, and The World According to Garp, I believe, is his most important novel. The tendency, I believe, the fashion is to think that that perhaps A Prayer for Owen Meany is more significant because of its Vietnam theme, and it's a very successful book. It's a wonderful book, but it's very much a pastiche on the tin drum. And I also know that a lot of people really, really admire Cider House Rules, and I do too, but it's very much John Irving's version of a Dickensian social justice novel. And The World According to Garp is his first completely mature work. He wrote several novels before then, and this was really the where he invents who John Irving is as a stylist, and it is his most absolutely characteristic work. It is also, I believe, the most historically significant of his works because, as opposed to the Cider House Rules, where he's taking on the issue of abortion, in The World According to Garp, he's really taking on the issue of gender, but he's taking it on from the perspective, in many ways, of the protagonist. And it's a fascinating novel. It's a kind of difficult novel to read now, in part because of this very, John Irving was at the time really a man who was grappling to be good with feminism. But he wasn't, he was grappling, and the ways he writes about women in the book can be very uncomfortable. I also recommend the film, which has some very, very good performances and some very odd directorial choices, and an incredibly strange choice in Robin Williams for the lead. I always wonder what would that movie be like with a different lead. I think it might be significantly different, and especially with a different director. But it's an interesting movie. Okay, so Ellen Jamesians, what are they? Well, Ellen James in The World According to Garp is a little girl who is raped and whose tongue is cut out. And Ellen Jamesians are women who have cut out their own tongues in order to protest what has happened to Ellen James and other violence against women. And this is really sort of a cruel parody of extremist feminism. And I don't know if you remember what extremist feminism could be like in the 1970s. But go back sometime and look at some of what was going on in, say, Ms. Magazine in 1973 to 1977. And I think you'll be interested in what you see. There really was an element that was, well, lesbian separatism was a real thing. Do you know what lesbian separatism is? And I guess maybe lesbian separatism is still sort of a real thing. But it was a group of lesbians who chose to simply have nothing to do with men. It was not at all uncommon, right, for groups to spell the word women with a Y to eliminate the word men from it. I think a lot of men felt like, I really want to be on your side, I really want to be your ally, but could you just make it possible by not acting so crazy? And so he caricatures the people who he sees as being self-defeating feminists as the Ellen Jamesians. And I guess I see some tendencies towards what I the elements of feminism and the elements of the gay rights movement that remind me of Ellen Jamesians sometimes in the autism community. One of them is the argument over whether or not we should use person first language. If you're not familiar with this, there's a school of thought that says that you should always put the person first. So you should say person with autism, person with a learning disability, and the idea is that you're not constricting somebody by a disability, and you're emphasizing them not as a sort of a crippled person, or well, as not sort of as a cripple or someone who is less than or different from a person. You're emphasizing their humanity. And there's a strong tendency for many parents and many professionals to prefer person-first language. Then there's the other school of thought which prefers autistic. So rather than saying person with autism, you say autistic person. And this is the school of thought that says, we're proud of being autistic. We want to embrace that as part of ourselves. I don't say I'm a person with maleness. I don't say I am a person who experiences homosexuality. I'm a man. I'm gay. I'm autistic. And personally, I fall more into that camp. But here's the thing, I really seriously remember listening to women talk about whether or not they could have an E in the word women. And I do understand. I just think being emotional either way is not helpful. If you want to use person first language, that's fine with me. If you want to say autistic person, that's as I say, that's what personally I prefer, and that's what I would hope you would use when you are referring to me. And that's what I try to do personally. I try to do whatever I think the person themselves prefers. I think that's just polite. But do you remember, do you remember the whole thing about Mrs. and Ms.? I actually worked at a school where women were not allowed to identify themselves as Mrs. if they preferred, and I don't know I don't know what protocol is now. But that always bothered me, that you could not, if you preferred to refer to yourself as Mrs., I think you should have that capability. And I think that taking that ability, I think, people who I knew who were upset about that, they weren't upset about other women being able to call themselves Ms. They were upset about not being able to use the way that they would want people to refer to them as Mrs. I think that these arguments about the niceties of language tend not to be helpful.